Pocketables Weekly News Roundup number 12. This has been an interesting week on the hardware side as far as PCs are concerned, but relatively quiet as far as phones are concerned. We've seen some rumblings of things about rumors of a new OnePlus 9, which isn't terribly surprising given the time of year. We've started to see rumors come out for the S21 as well, and a few more details on increased availability on certain phones like the LG Wing, which is certainly an interesting device. And I'll have a link to a few of those rumors in the description below, but I'm not going to go over most of them because they're either not substantial, like here's a code name, great, that doesn't really give me something worth reporting on, uh, or they've just been done to death, and I don't think they really bear repeating. The only one of particular interest to me is some information regarding the LG Wing is going to be available on T-Mobile coming soon, and there's going to be a buy one get one offer on that. Although that said, I'm not sure buy one get one makes a ton of sense for a phone as unique as the Wing. I can imagine that unless it's combined with like a buy a Wing get a V60 or similar promo, that the odds of having two people on the same account that both want such a unique device are fairly slim, although not impossible. So that's where the state of phones are right now. We're just kind of waiting for the new phone launches to start next year. More details on the new Snapdragon chips and things like that. So on the PC side, however, things are heating up. So we have a few different things going on in the background and some big splashy events that were newsworthy. So the 3070s launched. The 3070 reviews are finally out. The 3070 is the last of the new RTX 3000 cards that was initially announced by Nvidia and is finally for sale. And it's not quite living up to its build performance, but it's not far off either. And this is where I think marketing speak took over and went a little too far on the card. And it's not necessarily that they outright lied to people, but they went too far and they didn't quite phrase things properly for me to be 100% comfortable with the way they proclaimed it. So the 3070 is a fantastic card at $499 and was billed as having equal performance to the 2080 Ti. That's not quite accurate. It's close. And it typically is capable of trading blows with the 2080 Ti, which is not to say it's a bad card. At $499 to get roughly equivalent performance to a card that was $1,500 just a year ago is amazing. Not even a year, 6 months ago is astounding and is not something that I think that anyone is going to complain about. But I do want to nitpick on they said equal to, not up to. And there are scenarios where the 2080 Ti does pull ahead, either because it has more VRAM, or it has a wider memory bus, or any number of other minor architectural details that equate to, hey, this is 5% faster on the old card. That said, anytime you can use the ray tracing cores, the 3070's newer RT cores are just better. And it generally performs well at resolutions of 1440p. So for those people who are looking at those high refresh rate 1440p gaming monitors, the 3070 really is the sweet spot for that type of performance. Unless you want to go to 4K, then you're looking at the 3080 and the 3090. That said, I run 4K games on the equivalent of an old 1070 still, so as long as you're willing to make a few compromises, even at 4K, the 3070 is going to do well. and there'll be a link to some more information on the 3070 in the description. Not content to lay down and take a beating, AMD has also been busy. The new RTX 6000 cards were announced this week, and I'm a little less enthused about these because of the way they launched. Although both sides are playing the same game here. So the RTX 6000 launched, and we don't have any cards. No one has cards in hand. I don't have any verified benchmark numbers. And the numbers AMD showed were showing that their cards were capable of competing with the RTX 3000 cards at lower price points, which is great. We want competition, and although there are certainly people who bought a brand new RTX 3000 and are going to feel ripped off if Nvidia has to lower the price or launch a new round of cards with higher memory capacities to stay competitive. As consumers overall, we win when both parties are close and fighting for that dollar. What I'm not particularly pleased about is it's going to be a few weeks before we get reviews of the RTX 6000 series cards. Now, that's not to say that Nvidia is not playing games on their own. They pushed the 3070 back, even though it had already been announced. We already had information on other cards in the series, though, and what they did was they pushed it back in such a way that the Founders Edition cards were able to be reviewed the day before AMD's announcement, and the partner boards were able to be reviewed the day after. So they really made sure that everyone was still talking about Nvidia. I mean, we're talking about Nvidia during our AMD segment while AMD was making these announcements. So games aside, the RTX 6000 series looks promising. I'm going to take any of their benchmark numbers because they're not verified and they're not reproduced by anyone in the outside world with a grain of salt, but they do hold promise, and really the question is going to come down to availability. AMD has used a process that they're already familiar with. They've stuck with the same 7nm architecture that was used on the previous Navi cards, so they don't have any potential yield issues like Nvidia seems to be running into on the 8nm chips. They simply cannot get enough 3070s, 3080s, and 3090s made. If you wanted to go buy one today, good luck. And don't feed the scalpers who are sucking them up. Just make them wait and suffer with their cards. And eventually, if they ever come back down to reasonable prices for a used card, go ahead and buy them then. So if AMD has 6000 series cards in surplus and Nvidia can't build any, well, even if they aren't quite what we're being told they are in the press announcement, doesn't matter. You can only buy what is available for purchase. The real big question for me on the AMD cards is actually going to come down to drivers. I've never had a great experience with AMD's drivers. I'm not going to say that they're the worst, but they've always felt a little bit clunkier than Nvidia's. Your mileage may vary there. Obviously, it's been a while since I used an AMD card if I'm still using a Quadro P4000, and my driver experience with Nvidia is typically from the professional world, not the consumer world. So there's room for variance there. So AMD hasn't been sitting still in other areas either. They recently purchased Xilinx. Now, Xilinx may not be a household name for many of you. They are a FPGA manufacturer. Those are field programmable gate arrays. And although you may not think that you have a ton of use for a reprogrammable CPU, these are of great attention for various SmartNIC projects where they can be reconfigured based on the traffic flowing through them. They're also fairly common in low-run electronics. I've seen them in things like set-top boxes, video capture cards, all sorts of custom stuff that needs a reasonable amount of performance, but not necessarily has a high enough volume demand for fixed function logic to have been made for it. FPGAs really became far more common in the hacker vernacular and prosumer vernacular when they started being common targets for various crypto mining projects, although I think that's finally died away. Not really a great application of FPGAs because although they do offer good performance, they typically are nowhere near as performant as fixed function logic. You could build a laptop CPU in an FPGA, but it's going to use more energy than equivalent off-the-shelf ASICs that are custom built for running Windows and Linux and uh, Mac OS. So you're not going to see FPGAs in most of your laptops or consumer systems anytime soon, but this does give AMD more depth into, I mentioned SmartNICs. I've seen them in set-top boxes, video capture devices. I wouldn't be surprised to start seeing FPGAs on CPU dies. That's one that Intel's talked about for a long time, with the ability to, have a CPU that's responsible for a network controller or a cellular base station, have customized logic for that in an FPGA alongside standardized x86 cores. So with this purchase, we may start to see EPIC chips or Threadripper chips come with one of those chiplets as an FPGA that can be configured for various fixed function tasks that will outperform the more generalized x86 cores. One interesting bit in automotive news is General Motors releasing a electronic crate motor. So this is a Bolt engine. I believe it's a 200 horsepower model with a battery pack, and I believe a 4-speed automatic transmission that should drop in most of their target vehicles transmissions, although I'm sure that particular piece will have to be adjusted based on the vehicle this is going to be inserted into, to do an electronic conversion on existing gasoline vehicles. The concept of crate motors is not foreign to General Motors. Their small block 350 is a very popular one for racing engines, as well as just general hot rod and rat rod assembly. So I'm pleased to see them supporting the concept of custom electric conversion with this. And this is actually fairly good news, with some states moving to ban the sale of new gasoline vehicles within the next few decades. There's going to be a larger push to convert older existing on-road vehicles to electric. So I'm glad to see General Motors getting out in front of that. This might not be something that is going to be easy for your typical consumer to do, but I do see potential for dealerships and garages to offer electric conversion as a service with kits like this available going forward. Some bad news. I don't know how many of you may have picked up on. We really haven't covered any SSDs or media cards from Adata in a long time. And part of that is we started getting odd results, and Adata PR wasn't particularly helpful with it. So I didn't publish what we had because I didn't really trust the results I was getting. I would get these were, good results one run, and then I would get terrible results the next run. And I didn't even want to give them the benefit of a bad review because I didn't want to generate any real attention to the product. I didn't think they deserved even that courtesy. So I believe we're probably blacklisted by Adata, or if we're not, we probably will if they happen to see this segment. They've been caught changing both the NAND and the controller on their SX8200 Pro drive. So I'm not super familiar with the SX8200 Pro specifically. Like I said, I think we've been blacklisted, so I haven't had a chance to review one. But it appears what they've done is they've taken an SM2262EN controller based SSD and replaced it with an SM2262G, which is similar. They're both silicon motion controllers, and that's actually their defense, is that their datasheet doesn't say SM2262EN, which I think some of the Kingston drives we've looked at do. The datasheet just says SMI controller. So that makes me think they probably planned a little bit of this ahead of time and seems kind of in bad faith, but that is what it is. They've also changed the NAND, and quite frankly, looking at the results, they're saying that it still meets their spec. Well, it still meets their spec sheet because their spec sheet was written wide enough and sloppily enough to allow them to make this kind of change. Other vendors would have released a new model and maybe this one's just an SX8200 and that one's the Pro and the 8200 just gets the G controller and potentially gets different, maybe not slower NAND. And I'm not super upset with the dual sourced NAND. We've seen vendors say that, it comes with 96 layer TLC. Well, as long as the 96 layer TLC from whichever vendors, multiple, they acquire it from, performs the same, which it should if it's on the same controller with the same firmware and the NAND is the same speed, you can't beat them up too much. It's, NAND is the kind of thing that you might need to multi-source. The controller, on the other hand, is what really drives the design of the SSD, and you can't say that they needed to multi-source it because it's not like SMI doesn't have enough 2262 ENs. This looks like a cut to reduce cost and probably is being handled poorly. So I've probably beat up Adata enough here that we'll never see another Adata product, or at least we won't for the next few years. With all of that said, I'm going to close out this week's segment, and I want to thank anyone who supports Pocketables. For those of you who are interested, there's going to be Amazon affiliate links in the description. Purchases through those links help support Pocketables, helps us buy bits and pieces that we need to review things, adapters, card readers, cables, whatever bits and pieces it might be. It also occasionally helps us purchase items for review on the lower end. So we appreciate anyone who uses those. We also very much appreciate anyone who supports us on Patreon. I want to thank Alextrix for providing our opening and closing themes. As always, certainly check out his channel. There'll be a link in the description below. And there will have been a card somewhere alluding to that as well. And I want to thank you for watching.